got passion, wear it like a fashion trend. I got ambition, yeah, I'm on a mission.
Hey, we're back. Andres, I guess we didn't go anywhere.
We didn't go anywhere.
Pretty consistent.
We've been doing pretty well.
Yeah, I'm impressed by you.
I am also impressed by you. Actually, the person I'm really impressed with, Zach.
Yeah, well, because he's doing all the hard work.
Right. All we do is talk.
It's pretty easy.
Zach has to listen to us talk once and then listen to it again.
Or like that coffee super clip where we
Right.
said coffee a bunch of times. He had to listen to us for a few hours and just cut out the annoying coffee parts.
Wow. What a time. But that got a lot of good traction.
It did. Let's do
People
that
like
again.
it.
Let's
Coffee.
pick out a word from this one.
Oh, I thought we were doing coffee again.
No, let's make it about Kyle this week. It was every time someone says Kyle. Yeah.
That's cute.
Speaking of Kyle,
Right. Why are we talking about Kyle?
you go.
I go?
Yeah.
I get to introduce this time?
Yeah. You
Wow.
always do, don't you?
No, I didn't introduce last week.
Oh, okay.
We had Rich introduce last week.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyways, Kyle Packnick's here.
Woo.
Hi, Kyle.
My name is Kyle.
Good to see you, Kyle.
Good to see you guys as well.
I want to just keep saying Kyle just to make sure that Zach is disapproving. Anyways, Kyle, I'm so glad you're here.
It's an honor to be here. I'm a longtime listener and
First time caller.
first time caller. Exactly.
I will say before we started talking, well, the pre-podcast, Kyle admitted that he listens to us on Apple Podcasts.
That's true. This is the first time I've ever seen the studio, and it's quite impressive. It's quite a production.
What's your favorite part?
Of the studio?
Yeah.
It would probably be the Highland Road street sign.
Why is that?
I just think that it enhances the ambience more so than any of the pretty lights.
More so than
and
the
especially
coffee
the
one?
coffee sign. Yeah.
Yeah. Awful.
The coffee sign?
Yeah, I hate it.
That's messed up.
Sorry.
I didn't mean it.
It was a gift.
No, it wasn't. Yes, it was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was. You're
From
right.
the dumpster.
No.
But Kyle, so was there anything that you imagined about the studio in your head that now that you've seen it, the magic's kind of ruined?
So I thought there were like 30 little Zachs running around making this all happen. And I did not. So I'm just all that more amazed that Zach Lamine by himself puts this all together week in and week out. So I think that's probably the most amazing thing. Am I disappointed? No, it just makes me think more highly of Zach than I already did.
Zach, can you give yourself a boom, boom, boom?
So you can find his profile on social media. So Kyle, when we were talking before, you were not only did you mystify us with your singing voice, singing "Stay" by Rihanna, but you also have said you're a self-proclaimed movie buff. But supposedly only the quality stuff. Can you explain what a quality movie would be?
I apologize.
And a non-quality movie would be?
Yeah, okay, that's a great example. So I do love film, and I watch, on average, I'd say 100 movies that come out each year. So 2023, I'm about 50 movies in already.
New
just to give you
movies?
a case. Yeah, new movies. I'll watch the classics, of course, but I love to watch the good stuff. And you could kind of tell before a movie comes out if it's going to be good or not. But I'll check the reviews. If it's lousy, like what's the most recent lousy movie that came out?
Barbie movie.
No, Barbie is not one of them. I also don't want to offend certain people. Like Kevin Butterfield upset a lot of country people the other day.
So he did. There's really high ratings from those of us who don't listen to country.
Nice. So I would say I think like The Flash was one of those big movies that was expected to do really well and flopped because it really wasn't that compelling. So that would be a movie that I would pass on. But movies that I would look for are usually probably like the more indie type, but Oppenheimer is one that I just saw the other day, which is not an indie. That's a compelling movie. It was fantastic. So that is the difference between good and bad.
Kyle, where do you look for your reviews?
I'm a big IMDb guy.
Not Rotten Tomatoes.
I do also like Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay.
Yeah, those are my. And then if I want to go down the line, Roger Ebert and some of those other.
I've never heard of that.
ones. I just made that one up. No, that's a real one.
Roger Ebert's a real movie critic.
He is, yes.
And also, so being a businessman, do you have like a budget line for seeing all these movies like built into your monthly expense?
Being a businessman.
Yeah.
This is a weird plug for a company called MoviePass that went bankrupt a few years ago, and the model was amazing. It was basically like Netflix, but for movies. You'd pay $9.99 and you could watch unlimited movies. Oh. And so it sounded too good to be true because it was. So people like me went to the movies, saw like 20 movies a month, and it went under. But it recently got rebought. They have a new system. So I'll go out and I pay $10 a month and I see about 5 movies each month.
Wow.
So
That's pretty
Where
cool.
do you get one of these magic passes?
Again, this feels like a plug. Just go to moviepass.com or .org or .gov, whatever it is.
While we're talking about advertisements, I'm serious. That muffler company who gives discount mufflers in Bridgeport, hit me up with those coupons. I'm still waiting.
You're still waiting.
Our podcast is not big enough for that.
No.
But I want those coupons.
One day.
Yeah. And then we're going to get those free movie passes
Free movie
too.
passes.
Yeah. I'm actually in this for the money.
Right.
So.
Right. We should go together, Russ. That should be our.
What, for the mufflers?
No. I mean, we could for those two to the movies.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And then we could rate the movies. We bring a Kyle segment of the podcast.
Yeah, sponsored by Kyle Packnick. If he pays for us to go see the movies, you can have your own segment on this podcast. How's that sound?
I'm in.
All right.
Packnick's
We're going to
Picks.
hold you to it. Packnick's Picks. There
There
we
you
go.
go. I like it.
New segment.
I came here with an angle.
So, can you give us your top 3 movies that have come out this year?
Ooh, great question.
Not in any particular order, just top 3.
Yeah, okay. So it's fresh, but Oppenheimer would be up there for me. There's a movie that is called You Hurt My Feelings. It's with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. It was a good indie film that I'd highly recommend. And then, none are coming to mind immediately, so I'm going to say the Barbie movie. I have high expectations for it.
You haven't seen it, but you know it's good.
I know it's going to be good.
So I heard a fact about the Barbie movie like a month or two ago that was really interesting, that they used so much pink paint on the movie set that there's a worldwide pink paint shortage. Did you hear about that?
No, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's awful. What am I going to do now when I want to paint my house?
You gonna paint your house pink?
Yeah.
I guess I'm not surprised.
Why? Because of all of my pink shirts I wore last week.
Yeah, you had a variety. It was like every day you were trying to make a statement that, because I asked you on Monday, I was like, how many of those types of shirts do you have? And you're like, I don't know. And then every day after that, you wore a pink shirt.
I did, purposely.
Like you were trying to rub it in my
just for you.
face.
It was. It was.
I feel compelled to change my answer. I think it's a prompting from the Holy Spirit, but I changed Barbie out. I swap it for Blackberry was the movie that I saw. It was fantastic. It's based on the Blackberry phone itself, and I would highly recommend it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Amazing. I didn't know a movie could be so interesting about Blackberries.
I promise. I would put it's a Packnick's pick for you.
A Packnick's pick. Speaking of Packnick's pick, I think you have something special for us today, don't you?
I do. I do. So I want to be clear. The prompting or the request was to bring a gift that we
You're
could
not
display.
supposed to tell people. Zach, you got to cut that out. You got to... like that.
So I brought you something that's probably lame, but I think it's a cool example because it helps explain exactly what I do. So it is a plaque that currently has my name on it. We'll etch it out. We'll etch it out and replace it with Andres or Russ or Jesus or
Zach.
Yeah, exactly. However we want it. But my job, my career is as a strategic sourcing professional or procurement person. So what that means is I negotiate on behalf of our company to get us the best deals for goods and services. So one of the first projects I ever did was go out and source and negotiate for a bunch of trophies or awards that we could give out to like 300 people. And so I went to all these companies and negotiated the best rates we could get for 300 of these. And so I had requested samples to then look at with the business owners. And when I gave them the sample, I gave my own name. And so this is not an award that I ever won. This is just one that I made for myself. So in that way, it is essentially stolen. And I want to pass that on to the Sanctuary Podcast.
Wow.
Now, because that's so lame, I also got you a little mini basketball hoop and a basketball if you want to go with that option as well. But
Well, as sports guys, we're
Yes,
thankful
yes.
for the basketball.
We're so excited. Honestly, that might be the best part of the whole podcast. as a sports guy, as one who likes sports.
Yeah, I know Andres.
Wow, is that digital camouflage on the sports hoop?
It is. It is. This was not stolen. This was a gift that has sat in the garage for a long time, and now it'll sit here.
Now let's sit here. We're gonna give it a lot of use.
Yeah, every
All right,
day.
we gotta hang these up.
Well,
Yeah, toss that somewhere.
I don't want to take Kyle's name off this. Why would we
No.
mention
We're
it?
gonna leave Kyle's name on it. Oh, we're double stacked. It's all right. We'll find a good place for it.
No, it's fine. It should lean against the coffee one.
What?
right
No, we
over
don't want
the
to cover the
coffee
coffee sign.
Yes, as much as possible. We're gonna just start stacking.
Cluttering up the coffee sign. Everybody needs to see that.
Kyle's
though.
really stretching this cord.
He's and a little basketball.
Russ, you have one shot. Do not miss your chance.
You can just take them off.
All right, I'm going to tap into the spirit of Dennis Rodman. Hit this J.
For anyone listening, he
I made
missed.
That clang was me swishing it. All right, well, Kyle, thanks for the gifts. I can't wait for them to be displayed for many, many years to come. And for everybody who walks in here and sees your award from 2017.
Please change out my name.
No, I also like that it says 2017 on it. It's a, just,
It's a memorabilia piece.
that's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
all the things you've accomplished.
It's gone up in value over time.
It is pretty cool, though. Is it like laser etched on the inside?
Yeah, I think I can't give out the exact rate, but we got a good steal. But they're good quality awards.
That's the one that you went with.
That's the one that we went with. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
It's because they put his name on it.
So there's 300 of those floating around with
Right.
different people's names on it from 2017.
There's like 1,800. This has been
Oh,
an annual
wow.
thing. Yeah. Yep. It was a good deal.
So you get the same one every time.
I'm sure somebody has replaced me and gotten a better one. But yes, yeah, that was the idea.
So Kyle, speaking of your job, one of the reasons why we wanted you to come here is because you are a natural people person and leader in our community and just out in the world. So I wanted to pick your brain about what it's like to be a Christian in a professional environment that's not Christian. So can you just fill us in on, I know you kind of tapped into this a little bit already, like what you do and maybe even some stereotypes of people in your field.
Yeah, love it. So I am a strategic sourcing associate director. I work for a company called AstraZeneca. They focus on rare disease and cancer research. And so my day-to-day is, like I mentioned, negotiating. So a lot of working with other people, other departments. But to answer, I guess, the heart of your question is being a Christian in the workplace. For me, I can't not be a Christian in the workplace. So it's me just kind of choosing to be bold in all of my interactions. So that's not me being in other people's faces telling them, hey, this is my religion, you have to join me. But it's when somebody asks me, hey, what did you do this weekend? I'm going to share about the church event or service event that I went to. Or if they confide in me about something they're struggling with, I'm going to offer to pray for them. So it's really me living as myself, but in that work setting. There comes with it a lot of challenges, but so many opportunities. And I think the coolest part is I have the opportunity to minister and share the love of Jesus with people who wouldn't otherwise get it because they're maybe not going to church or what have you. And so I have just a number of incredible stories and examples of my faith walk. I've also learned a lot through that about how to interact with people, be respectful. And I'm very grateful to be where I am. And I think it's where God has me for this chapter of my life.
What's a mistake that you've made in that workplace, bringing your because you're talking about how you can't separate yourself from your Christian faith? Is there a mistake you've made in the past where you're like, oh man, I definitely shouldn't interact with people in this way at work with my faith? Do you have a story about that?
So many, yeah. I would. The example that I would actually probably use is just my day-to-day role. So I mentioned I'm a negotiator, and one of the things that, negotiating is about trying to get the best deal and making sure that you are able to save the company money. And so there's a lot of things in that can be tricky as a Christian follower. We talk about trying to manipulate the truth or hold back information, stuff like that. And so early on in my career, especially, I think I was just sort of following what I saw around me. And so when it came to meeting with suppliers and talking about budgets and sharing that information, I'm afraid to admit that like I used to lie about some of those numbers to try to better our company, better our position. And I wrestled with that and have been convicted and have kind of figured out a way to do it honorably and respectfully, but also maintain like those Christian values. So I that's part of the question that you had asked. You had also asked just interacting with people. And I think early on, I just used to not do anything. I think I was afraid. I think that this could be the case in a lot of settings, school settings, retail, what have you, where it's a little taboo to talk about faith openly. And so I opted just not to say anything and just kind of kept to myself about it. But I realized over time that it was kind of hurting who I was because I was just kind of suppressing such a big part of my life. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of really cool lessons in that. I have a super quick story that I'd like to share about one of the ways that I shared my faith early on. And I can't take credit for it. I learned this from somebody else, but it was a prayer jar that I put out. I had befriended some of my coworkers or desk mates around me. And so I just put out a bunch of sticky notes, some pens, and basically left a prompt that said, hey, if you ever have any prayer requests, feel free to write them down, and I'd be happy to pray for them. And at first, it was just a talking point. People were like, okay, that's cool. That's interesting. And it allowed some people in the office who were Christian to then know, oh, he's a Christian, and we could have those kinds of discussions through that. But what it turned into was this really cool, amazing thing where people, Christians, non-Christians, all walks of life, would write down different prayers, and I would pray for them. And we had Facebook for Work, which was Yammer, was the name of it. But I had a group on there with a couple other prayer warriors who felt led and would share certain things that were not confidential about prayer. And it was just this really amazing way to let others know that I was a Christian. And then at that point, it's up to them if they want to lean into that, if they want to talk to me more about it, or if they don't want to, which is totally fine. And I think HR never came around. Nobody gave me a hard time because it was subtle. It was participatory, optional. Nobody had to do it. So that is something that has really helped my faith and been an encouragement to me and hopefully to others as well.
So you were talking about when people ask you what you did this weekend, you don't hold back from what you actually did. So how do you respond? Like, I want people who are listening to this to have some sort of application that they like. Maybe they are in the same exact situation and they find themselves having a hard time to figure out how to interact with certain people. And so it's encouraging. I feel like somebody like you who's like a 9 out of 10 on like the outgoing scale, probably 10 out of 10. And also just the way you integrate your faith into your life, you're like a 10 out of 10. So I feel like sometimes we need that 10 out of 10 example to feel encouraged to move from like a 3 to a 4. So that's why like you're here sharing. So you're not perfect, but you're doing an awesome job. And so there's so much to learn from you. So that's why you're here and you're informing us. So and you're teaching us. So that's why I wanted to ask a couple of these questions so that hopefully someone who's listening, who's in a similar situation, can start moving towards like, okay, like I could respond in this way, or this, I could start doing this. So this is one of those questions where when somebody shares with you, because I'm sure you're asking everybody how their weekend was, because that's just who you are. You just like, you want to know people, you want to build a relationship. They share something that is like, something that's not like a Christian wouldn't be doing this on the weekend. How do you respond in a way that is like still encouraging, or it doesn't, like you don't respond in some sort of demeaning way to them? Yeah.
I think I definitely err on the side of caution, or at least probably more listening early on. I think it's important to have a relationship before you can really come in and share that correction. You also know just from those interactions who really is open to feedback and who is maybe doing their own thing. So if conversations go a certain way that I don't think are God honoring. I'm probably going to try to steer them back to whatever the business at hand is going to be. But if I feel like I can trust them, or they can trust me rather, and we have a good enough relationship and there's been enough seeds planted, I'll definitely be open or point out maybe an area, and I'll usually phrase it or start it as, hey, do you mind if I point something out to you? And I think what makes it easier is I'm pretty quick to ask for feedback a lot in my day-to-day. So it's not like it's out of the blue, me just correcting them. I'm seeking it often. So I think that makes it a little easier when I'm coming and people are a little bit more receptive to it. And then I'm going to do it in love. I'm not going to tell them, hey, this is the way it's supposed to be. But I will not necessarily bring God in unless I get the sense that that's okay. So I want to instill those biblical principles. I want to talk about my Christian background, but I want to do it respectfully. And you kind of know, and I'm talking to two people who I know do this on a regular basis as well. There's a balance that you have to figure out there. But I've had some really fruitful conversations come from those situations. And I think one of the things I learned early was I was guilty of nodding along and saying, oh, yeah, cool. And it was more detrimental than anything. And it became apparent when a lot of angry people kept it confiding in me. And then I realized I was part of the problem there. So it wasn't just my face. It was the fact that I was enabling them in a certain way. So I think it's important to be able to speak up and hold on to your convictions, but reading the situation and doing it delicately depending on the relationship.
Which I think is like, I work with high school students, so I think it's something kind of over time that I've thought a lot about when thinking about, like, I follow some of my high school students, I see what they like, and like it's one of those things where like I have strong Christian high school students, and I'm like, why are you liking this picture of like this group of students who are like doing stuff that I know you don't agree with, but in some ways it hurts your witness, because then you're like, oh, that's really cool. Or like, oh, well, you liked that the other day, and why are you telling me that it's wrong now? And like, I think working through that of like, man, if you're going to stay strong in your convictions, like doing it in a way that's loving and honoring, but like not always cheering on like, oh, you were out doing X, Y, and Z. That's so cool. Like, that's awesome. And then a couple weeks later, you're like, hey, so I noticed that this is happening in your life. And they're like, well, you didn't have a problem with that 3 weeks ago. Why are you mentioning it now? You know, so like learning kind of how to balance that in a way that's like, hey, I want to love you well. I might disagree with you, but I still want to love you through that, which I think is just, it's a hard line to walk.
So good. And the idea, or we have the ability to go back and rehab that conversation. So you kind of alluded to it, Andres, but there's been times where maybe I've had a conversation, walked away from it, and have been troubled by it. And maybe I had a prompting from the Holy Spirit to kind of go back and revisit that. And so it's then setting up that environment. So maybe if I know I'm going to meet with them separately anyways, and I have the opportunity to do it there, I think it's worth it.
That's cool.
So, something that I've seen in my life, I've done this too, like it's not a good thing to do. And I've also seen some of my friends do it as well, is that, cause it's easy when you're working at a church to completely surround yourself with other believers and then isolate. You're isolated from the world. And I've seen this like play out in my friends' lives where they isolate from all like the non-believing people in their work environment. And then you're never around non-believers. You're just disgusted by the things that they do or something. You're just like, oh, the world's acting like the world again, you know? And so how do you not isolate from non-believers? And because otherwise you would never be able to show, like, be a witness to reveal Jesus to them. Because otherwise, like, you end up like going through your life and the only person you're ever witnessing to is the cashier. You're like, I'm going to be Jesus to the cashier because that's the only person that doesn't believe in Jesus that you interact with. Right. You know what I'm saying? So like, how do you interact with your coworkers and not isolate? 'Cause this verse from Romans 10 comes to my mind. It's like, how can they call on the one whom they have not heard of? And how can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? Or something like that, Romans 10. So we're supposed to be interacting with non-believers, even though like they could do stuff that we find offensive. How do you integrate with them and not put up some sort of wall where you're pushing them out because you're working with them all the time?
Yeah, and obviously Jesus was a perfect example of that, eating with the sinners, living with the sinners. So I think that that's important, and I get the importance of maybe cutting out certain people if there's a temptation there, if they're going to lead you astray. But I think a lot of times we maybe play that card a little too early, and I think it's important to work in those relationships for the exact reasons you said. So, I'll try very hard not to involve everybody whenever I can. And I will tell you, I have a lot of deep friendships with non-believers. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Those are special relationships. And the deal with it is that they know that I'm a Christian, but I'm also not going to tell them, hey, this is my faith. You need to follow this faith. This is the way it is. We have this working relationship where if we're eating together, I'm going to pray. I'm going to share about like all the amazing things God's doing in my life. But they know, and they even know that at the end of the day, I am trying to plant those seeds. I want them to come to Christ, but they know that I'm not going to force that on them until they're ready. And it's a really cool trust that we have with one another. And we're doing super fun things. We're going out, playing games, living life together. It's not all Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Even if I want it to be that way sometimes. But I think it's so important to have those relationships for the exact reasons you said, because that's who we should be ministering to. So be it the workplace or just friends aside, I have a lot of non-believers, and I'm continuing to plant those seeds, and I'll trust that God will use me and use others when his timing's right.
So what environments do you go to with your friends or like coworkers who are unbelievers? Like, there's no judgment here. just what are the things that you do with them? Give us like real life examples, just like 5 or 6 things that you do with them.
So, my bachelor weekend, I'm gonna reference that.
Your bachelor party?
My bachelor weekend.
It was a whole weekend.
It was a whole weekend.
It was a whole weekend.
Do we need the censor button ready?
Zach could be ready. This might scare him too.
When was this? How long ago was this?
So I've been married to the beautiful Tess Packnick for almost 4 years now. So this would have probably been about 4 years ago.
Probably.
We went to Montreal, Canada for our bachelor weekend, and I think.
Was that to escape the laws of the U.S.?
It was. No, it was not. It was because I had been to a lot of states. I hadn't been to Montreal. I wanted to check it out. And so my brother, who is also a pastor, prepared this amazing bachelor weekend of all the things that I like to do. And they were escape rooms. They were going golfing, a trip to the casino, going out, watching a MLS soccer game, and all sorts of fun activities, bike riding, hiking, you name it. And all the while, we would, my groomsmen consisted of believers and non-believers. And each time we went to different activities or before, we would pray. And in certain instances, when we would share about like just deep, meaningful stuff. And there was a lot of just love in that room. I remember there was a point where we all had our arms around each other and we were saying prayers. And so I guess I had the upper hand, and that was my bachelor weekend, so I was kind of calling the shots. Right. but they understood that was sort of the case going in. They knew it was going to be a fun time, and they would sit through those interactions. And sometimes they would ask questions, sometimes they would remain quiet, and it wasn't what we were doing the whole time. We would also talk about other stuff and talk about what guys talk about, which is what, Russ? What do we talk about?
I don't know.
What do guys talk about?
Yeah, sports.
Video games, movies.
Well, if you're a movie buff, I guess you talk about
dolls.
Yeah.
Kyle, I have a question for you.
Please.
Because you were talking about people who may cut off friendships too early after becoming a Christian, or like knowing like, hey, like this friend group might not be the best for me. How have you kind of distinguished that in your life? And even like I have a couple friends that I'm like, hey, I know that there are just certain boundaries I have with them of like, hey, I'm not going to go do this with you, but I really love you and I love hanging out with you. So like we can spend time here, and here, but we're not going here together. How have you learned to distinguish that in your life as you've kept your non-Christian friends around? Because I think it's super important to have, but there are certain things that you just like, maybe like, yeah, I know that this particular thing is bad, so I'm not going to partake in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say it takes intentionality and finding kind of the opportunities where it makes sense to step back and be a part of. I don't think there's ever been a person in my life that I've ghosted per se. I've been fortunate enough to not have to do something like that. But if I am invited to certain activities where I see red flags, I'm probably going to avoid them. And I'll try to be as forthcoming in my response back to that sort of event. And I say all this having learned a lot, and I'm not perfect, and I have made plenty of mistakes, but over time have figured out, all right, certain things I should be a part of, certain things I shouldn't be. But what I'll usually try to do is if I forgo something like that, I'll then try to reach out and say, hey, you want to go grab food? You want to go catch a sports game, and try to continue to pour into that relationship. And I'd say the ones that are maybe more detrimental or on the extreme side, I'd say time overall just kind of naturally phases out. So maybe we'll catch up every so often, and then over time, we don't keep as in touch. But I am fortunate enough that I have a lot of friends that live in the area or live close enough or are able to travel where we're able to keep those friendships going. And we try to do it in the best way possible, respecting each other's boundaries.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the different things in your bachelor party weekend, and what have you in your arsenal? Maybe 2 or 3 things that are you like the. Oh, you're gonna beep out the word. Do you have 2 or 3 things in your pocket? Okay, that they're automatic wins for your non-believing coworkers, like. You want to invite them to go do something, and you're like, oh man, every time we go to this place with non-believers, it's really like disarming and it's really easy to talk to them, or like we always have a good time. Like, do you have 2 or 3 things that you could recommend people do?
It's such a great question, and I'm going to ponder on it because nothing immediately comes to mind. But I'd say anything that gets you out of the office and in an environment where maybe alcohol or other substances aren't in play makes it a little easier. So I'd say I love to golf, and I think a big thing amongst corporate world is going to like one of those indoor golf lounges. Mini golf could be another example where you're just walking around, talking, having a good time, and it leads to natural, like meaningful conversation. And it could be surface level, it could be meaningful. You could kind of gauge the situation, but you're going to have some alone time. If you need a break or they need a break, there's other people in the setting where they can sort of separate. So I'd say anything along those lines. I'd also throw out, I'm racking my brains from all the like happy hour corporate things that you do. Bowling is another one.
That's an automatic win?
I told you, that's why we got to go bowling.
No, it's because you're absurdly good at bowling.
I'm not.
I do want to go
Can I
bowling
tell you
with
my quick
Andres.
theory about something?
Yes.
Okay. Andres is in the cool category. So just prefacing this whole thing. So bowling and darts are 2 of the things that if you're just better than your friends, it's awesome. It's cool. But if you're like really, really good, like there's a graph. The better you get, the less cool you become. So like being better than your friends, you're still trending up, but just better. If you're like really good, all of a sudden your coolness drops off significantly.
I'd agree.
Yeah. You want to add any sports to that?
I'm racking my brain,
darts and bowling.
I would throw out curling, which I might lose a few people.
Like the Olympic sport?
Yeah, like the Olympic sport. I'm a diehard curler. Not that I play it, but I follow it with regularity. I could tell you the Americans. I could tell you their historic
Your
records.
coolness goes down as you get better. I feel like cooling seems fun. You get to go hard with some brooms.
Yeah, but if you actually were representing the country, well, that would be pretty cool if you were representing the country. But I would say
You're just doing it for free time?
Yeah, if you're doing it for fun and you're decent at it, that's cool. If you're a hardcore curler, I don't know.
You got the special like sliding shoes.
Yes. Yeah. Once you get the shoes, I think your coolness goes
That's
down
true.
a little bit.
That's
but
with bowling.
in a sense, your coolness goes up because you're on the ice.
Hey.
Sorry, everybody.
That's wild. That's wild. All right, Kyle, I have a question.
Wait, hold on.
Sorry.
Can you just remember your question for a minute? Just 1 minute.
Can I remember my question?
Yeah, can you just hold on to it? Are you gonna remember it a minute from now?
Yeah, I've held on to
Are you
it.
sure?
Yeah, I got it.
You
It's
need to
right
write
here.
it down?
Nope, I got it.
Okay,
right
good.
here.
We don't have any pens or anything.
Nothing at all.
So really, bowling. That's
Automatic wins. I told you I needed to ponder. All right.
okay. Because I've heard rumors of you out and about. That's what, like, you know, I know some examples. I'm just gonna not say them out loud.
What are
but
the source of these rumors, and what are some?
I'm not so Kyle is so good at going out with non-believers and just like maintaining friendship with people that I hear about it from other people in the community. They're like, "Oh, I saw Kyle Packnick at this place with a bunch of people I didn't know," and they're people within the sanctuary community, so they know you and your friends. So it's like, wow, that's so cool that Kyle goes out and not just with Christians, but he might be the only Christian in the group, and that's really, really cool because that's something that I want to do. But I've insulated myself too much at this point where I don't have those non-Christian relationships. So this is why it's interesting to me, because it's like, I want to get out there with my neighbors. I live in a big apartment building, and I have an 84-year-old neighbor named Mary Jane that she can't hear anything any of us say, but she's awesome. She's so cool. She hangs out with my kids.
Does she know Spider-Man?
No, but she was babysitting or dog sitting a deaf dog, which was fun because it's kind of like she's mostly deaf too. So it's kind of like art imitates real life. Is that the saying?
Which was the art?
I'm not sure.
Mary Jane or the dog?
Both of them. Anyways.
I'll throw out board games as well.
Okay, good. I forgot what I was talking about.
Yeah,
so.
I think board games is another great outlet. I love to host, but you could also do that anywhere. You could go meet up anywhere, play any kind of game. I'm a nerd almost to the extent, but I won't play Dungeons and Dragons. So it's not that I'm anti Dungeons and Dragons. There's a line, and it's just one that I'm not ready to cross yet.
Too nerdy?
That's too much for me. But I will play any kind of strategy game. Even if it is like a Dungeons and Dragons theme. I feel like I'm getting off topic. Just bringing it back. I think board games is another great outlet to get to.
So the Lords of Waterdeep?
I was hoping you would say that. So that is actually a trigger word. I've spent
PTSD.
So many hours playing in person, yes, but on the phone. There was an online app, and all COVID, I got so good at Lords. I played hundreds and hundreds of times, and so I deleted the app because it actually became an unhealthy addiction. And
Wow.
Tess was a big, she was my rock through that. And
So you dropped off Lords of Waterdeep over COVID and you picked up golf.
yeah, golf is a healthier addiction.
Yeah.
No, I try to do everything in sparingly. So I try not to golf more than once a week, I would say.
For your work's benefit, I will not say what time this is or what day this is as well.
I did get permission for this.
Sure, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Actually, you know what? That's actually great. I won't make fun of that because that's a good like Christian value right there. Being honest with your boss.
That's right. That's
There we
right.
go.
And I've had really good bosses. And not to go on a tangent, but we talked about leadership. I think that's why that's where I've learned a lot of the values that I have. Is I've just had amazing bosses. But I'm so excited to hear about Andres' question. So
Yeah, me too. Do you remember?
No, I lost it.
No, you didn't. You
No,
said you
he's
remember it.
lying.
You grabbed it in your hand.
I did grab it, but I let go.
Oh.
I think something I'm curious about, Kyle, is were you always like this? Like growing up in college, like were you always super like ready to share your faith? Is it something that you've grown into? Because I just think about people in like my friends who are Christians, who are working, who are like, I'm too scared to say something, or like I wouldn't want to. Like if people really knew what I believe, like they would ostracize me. They wouldn't want me around. So is that like something that you've continuously grown into, or have you always just been like, no, it's all right. Like I'll risk it.
No, I have not always been like this. It's been a journey, and I'll give you probably like a really short testimony because that's probably appropriate here. But I grew up in a Christian household. My mother was involved in the church. And so I had a basic understanding of Jesus, but I knew he was there, but I didn't really know him, and I didn't want to pursue that. And so I was always very timid and insecure growing up, and got picked on a little bit. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I remember like you talk about like putting yourself out there. For some reason, I always think of like middle school dances. And I just remember just like trying to muster up the courage to go out there and dance and know that I was going to look silly.
Who were you going after?
Nobody. I just wanted to fit in. I was not, it wasn't even for a girl. All
I'll say is you should see Kyle on the dance floor now.
Are you wild?
Wild times.
Well, so I think that's what happened was at some point it clicked. And honestly, I do think having an understanding in Jesus actually helped. There is a boldness that comes, like a courage that comes from knowing Christ, because it's no longer seeking the approval of others, but knowing that you're secure. And so, yeah, when it comes to that, like high school dance, yeah, I just took a chance one time and busted a move or two. And maybe some people laughed, but then maybe other people were like, busting a move back, and then just kept going. So anyways, when I went off to college was where I was really humbled. I think we talk about leadership. A lot of people used to tell me that I was a natural born leader. So yes, I was insecure and all that, but I was also the one organizing the neighborhood kickball game or whatever made up games we play with friends. But I was always very shy, and then people kept telling me, oh, you're a natural born leader. And so when I started to feel secure in myself, there was an inflated ego and a self-righteousness that wasn't good. And it really came from a lack of understanding what like a good leader looks like. I used to think that a leader was whoever is the most important person in the room. And I've over time kind of changed that definition and realized it's the one who can unlock the potential of those around them. So when it came to college, there was just a humbling season where God really worked in my life and showed me how not of a big deal I was. And it was that time too that I wandered off campus. I went to a Catholic university, had attended Mass a few times, and it just wasn't able to connect to it or get a lot out of it. And I came across this church, and I walked in, and I was the only white person there. But I remember just feeling so welcome and so loved. And during the passing of the peace, these older women came up to me and started hugging me and kissing me. And it sounds weird. It sounds weird, but I'm telling you, it was just perfect. It's just what I needed at the time.
Cheek kisses?
Yes, cheek kisses. Thank you. But for those 4 most vulnerable years of my life, I had a grounding in Jesus, and it led to these really cool things. So we talk about, again, getting back to the root of your question, which is, was I always like this? The answer is no. But as I've learned how fragile and weak I am as a person, I've come to realize just how powerful my God is, and how that is why I live my life. That is my purpose. And so when it comes to those situations where I have an opportunity to minister, there's been a number of times where I maybe missed the mark, and now I really try not to, because I know the magnitude of what it means to know Jesus. And so I don't want to miss a chance. It's worth taking the risk. That rejection, which comes time and time again, it's worth it, even if one person can give their God to life and could give their life over to God. And what's cool is that I'd say it's not one out of every so often. People are usually really receptive to it if you approach them in love.
So you mentioned your boss before. What's it look like to be a man of God to your boss?
Yeah, great question.
Well, have you always had the same boss, or have bosses changed? Because like that affects it. Because like some people, I'm sure, are listening to this, are like, "Oh, my boss is terrible," or "I had a good boss once, and this boss is not like that." So like maybe different situations. Like, how can you be a good man of God to your boss?
Yeah. I've had a number of bosses, a lot of really great ones, some not as great. And in each season, it's different in how I approach them. And so those more difficult bosses where I'm really struggling to connect, or I'm really struggling to agree with how they're leading, it's hard, but I learned to just try to honor them and give them my respect, and know that it might not be reciprocated, and that's okay. Those relationships, like the one I have with my current boss, where it is fruitful and it is a meaningful one, and they want to see me succeed and I want to see them succeed. It comes down to just honor and respecting them and putting their needs ahead of yourselves. And one of my favorite styles of leadership is servant leadership. And I know we're talking about my boss, but I don't think you need a title to be a leader. And I think that there's opportunities to leader or to be a mentor up the line as well as down the line. But servant leadership is exactly what it sounds like. It's a leader taking on a servant type role and putting the needs of others ahead of themselves. And Jesus so perfectly demonstrates this throughout the Bible. And I immediately go back to Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. And if you just like, it's such a powerful passage. And it also, you just think about the impact that it had on those disciples and the empowerment that it had on their lives. It's amazing. So I'm striving to be a servant leader, and that looks like me putting the needs of others, be it those who work with me, under me, above me, putting their needs ahead of myself. And I could give you a number of examples, but I've been answering a long question. So
could you give us an example?
So,
I'll give you a reason why.
Yeah.
Because it's really easy to go in with the mindset of like, I'm going to serve others before myself, but then it's easy to go from letting people just use you. Mm-hmm. So,
good point.
How can you set up good boundaries? I don't know, you can't answer like all the questions, but like I was looking for an example so that people can say, oh, I can do that. And then also maybe have a boundary of not being taken advantage of, but a way that someone could be a servant.
Yeah, great question.
Leader.
So I will volunteer to do maybe the grunt work a lot of times. Sometimes it could be as simple as we're having a meeting, somebody needs to take notes. And a lot of times you think of that as a more, I don't know, just not as impressive, a more menial role. But I'll do that, and I'll try to always do that first. And my hope is that in the next meeting, somebody else will volunteer and see that. And so that's where it's important to recognize that you're not getting taken advantage of, like you just outlined. And I think early on in my career, I remember one time we needed to order lunch. I said, I'll do it. So I was the one who ordered Panera. But then I became the Panera guy, and it was something
coupons.
Another plug.
Yep.
That it was something that I couldn't get rid of, and anytime something happened, people would come to me and say, hey, could you order this? So it was me. It took me having a conversation with my team and saying, hey, here's how I'm feeling right now. I don't want this to be my job. It feels like I'm beneath all of you. And so I was honest, expressed that, and I think people picked up on that and respected that. And usually you don't even have to have that conversation because people see it, recognize it, value it, and will kind of continue that chain as well. So that's a quick example, but I think your point about serving but not being sure not to get taken advantage of is an important one in any world, any industry.
Mm. But if you do find yourself in the situation that Kyle is in and everyone's trying to order Panera through you, start a Panera rewards account.
Yes.
Because think about it, if you're ordering 50 sandwiches.
Oh, you're stacking, bro.
Yeah, like you could go out to eat a couple times for free at that point.
But also, they've made the world so much easier because now you just do like Chipotle group order. You send out a link. Everybody puts in their order. It makes your life a lot easier. Just throwing it out there.
So if people start looking at you as the Panera guy, you switch to be the Chipotle guy.
Oh, did I switch to Chipotle?
You're talking about Chipotle.
Man. But Panera does the same thing. But Chipotle
cool.
also does that. So it makes life easier.
It does. It does. No, thanks for that example. That was really good. But also, I'm letting you know you missed out on an opportunity.
I wasn't as tech savvy as I am now.
Kyle, I think it's really cool though, because I think something the church does not great at is we see someone like you and we're like, you should go into ministry. Like, Kyle, for all intents and purposes, like you could probably do my job as the high school director better than I can. Don't say no. It's true. Because you're naturally gifted. You're naturally gifted as a leader. You're a great speaker. And people would look at you and say like, oh, you're gifted for ministry. Just go into ministry. But I think what's so important is like the world actually needs people like you out in the world. Because even like if Russ and I are being honest, I mean, it takes us 10 times more to be intentional with making friends with non-Christians because we're surrounded by the church. I'm surrounded by BlackRock. I'm surrounded by Sanctuary. My friends are from Sanctuary. I go to Sanctuary, small groups. I work for the church. Like, I spend probably 60 to 80 hours here, like outside of work as well, you know? And I think that it's so important for people to know, like, hey, if you're gifted in all of those things, like, you're still called to ministry wherever you're at. Where you work is your ministry. And I think it's super important for people to see that and for people to know that and for them to know, like, just because you might have these natural giftings does not necessarily mean you're called to the church. Like, I actually, and there's sometimes where I envy people like you who are like, man, you have to fight for your faith. Nobody at BlackRock, Russ isn't asking me every day what I believe in, what I don't believe in. There's common ground there. You actually have to, like, make a point to, like, hey, this is what I believe and I'm going to live that out. And I have people who are watching me, who are checking to see if I am, even if they're not telling me they are. You know, you're around conversations where, like, man, I could stick up for the gospel right now, or I could shy away completely. And I just really want to shout you out. And for, like, anyone at Sanctuary who is in work environments where, like, man, you really have to fight for your faith, like, that is your ministry. It's not like you can glorify what Russ and I do and think that it's like, man, ministry is just us standing on platform and getting to speak every week. But, like, what you do is ministry day in and day out as you're ministering to people, as you're walking alongside people, shepherding people. It might not look the same, but it's so important to what we get to do as Christians.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that's I received that. It's very kind of you. Thank you, Andres. I think you're amazing too. One thing that you touched on is something that I've actually really wrestled with, which is, am I doing God's work? Am I in the right place? Because you mentioned yes, and I agree with everything that you say. It's an amazing, it is your pulpit a lot of times, wherever your work environment is, that's your opportunity to minister. But at the same time, I look at a lot of what I have and I feel, or I'll wrestle with the fact that maybe I know I have a comfortable salary and I have all these other things, and it leads me to question, like, is this where you want me, God? Because I know that you want what's right for me and what's good for me, but sometimes I fall into that slippery slope of prioritizing those other things and that comfort and that security that I have working in, like, a corporate job or just a different setting than a church. So I've always, I will continue to look up to you and Russ and other people who are in church, just because I know that is you submitting your life to Christ. But I completely agree with your sentiment that yes, anywhere we work can certainly be an avenue for teaching and ministering to others.
Yeah.
So I was hoping that you'd be able to give a challenge to us who are working in a non-church environment. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So you're going to have to really rack your brain for this, possibly. So 2 things. I'll give you one at a time, then you can answer one at a time, all right? What's something that people can start doing this week to go to work and work in a God-honoring way? I know it's kind of really, like, broad. I'm sure there's a lot of different things. But from your experience, what's something that someone could start doing if they haven't been working in a God-honoring way, to start going about working in a God-honoring way? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Was there a second question?
I'm going to hold on to it until
so
you're
kind
done.
of you. I couldn't handle 2 questions at the same time. That would be a lot. I think a simple but important one would be seeking out interaction in the office, no matter what that looks like, and just trying to let others know that you care about them or actually take a vested interest in their day-to-day. You don't have to bring in Jesus right out of the gates, but I think a lot of times it's super easy to go in, put our heads down, do exactly what we need to do, and get out. And I've been guilty of that sometimes as well. But where the fruit is when we get those interactions with people, sometimes just in our regular meetings, other times at the water cooler, which doesn't really exist anymore, but the printer, the coffee shop, or wherever people are meeting at, and just seek out a conversation and try to remember something about that person, follow up, ask them about their day. And through that, over time, see if you could build certain relationships, and when the time is right, pour into them, share about Jesus, share about your life. So that would be one example, I think, a challenge for all of you out there, no matter what industry or what environment you work in.
Yeah, that's great. So go interact with people is like the summed up. And also you really don't have a water cooler at your office?
We have those fancy water coolers where you don't see the water cooler itself. It dispenses and it has ice, and it's like a refrigerator.
I've never seen one of those.
It's like
Yeah,
a
me neither.
refrigerator. It's like your standard, but like the water cooler where you have the blue cooler,
The big blue,
the blue
5-gallon jug.
the jug on top. That doesn't. I haven't seen one of those.
Oh,
You should go upstairs. Yeah,
We
I was
have
gonna
one.
say, we have a water cooler, and we also always have those water cooler moments. I'm just filling up my water, which for someone who's, a full-grown adult, it's kind of like far down to reach.
Yeah, it's true.
You got to bend over and fill it up, and then people are walking by. You feel weird. Like it's also right in the doorway, so I got to move my butt out of the way so people can walk by.
So maybe they exist. I just haven't been seeking them out. I'm a big sink water fan, so I'll just go up to whichever sink is closest, fill up my water bottle that way, and I'm missing out on those water cooler opportunities.
You don't use your super futuristic water filler with ice?
The sink's a lot closer.
Disappointing.
Yeah.
Kyle.
We're getting off track at this point, but does your office have any other amenities besides this futuristic water filler?
There's a lot of coffee. There's multiple coffee machines. There's a cold brew coffee machine.
It's free?
It's all free.
What?
Well, we know where you're applying this.
Yeah, any snacks?
I'm not trying to plug. Yeah, they have snacks. Yep.
I interviewed at one place that they had a bar right in the middle. It's like a completely open floor with kind of like our office upstairs, like glass offices on the outside. They had a bunch of cubicles in the middle. And then about a third of the way through the room, there was a bar, and they had beer on tap. And at 4:00, that everyone would get free beer.
Wow.
And I didn't make it very far in the interview process, but I thought it was interesting. I've never seen that before.
I have friends that work at that company.
Really? In Stanford?
Yep.
Who knew?
Starts with a D.
No, it starts with an E. No,
Oh.
H. An H. Sorry.
Ah, two different
Oh yeah,
companies.
the other one. I know that one.
That's funny.
Also have a friend who used to work there.
Oh, really?
Small world.
Wow. I really hope we're talking about the same place. We'll catch up after this.
Deal.
All right. Where were we?
Second question.
Second question.
Andres was holding on to it this whole time.
I have no clue what he was
Oh,
going to
no. I got it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, the first one was about a challenge that people could start doing this week, about how to go to work in a God-honoring way. The second one was interacting with coworkers in a God-honoring and loving way. So, how can someone who's never interacted with a coworker or maybe had bad interactions with a coworker, and this isn't about like customers. We're not talking about people coming in or people that you're talking to on the phone. These are people that you're interacting with or you possibly could on a daily basis. How can you start showing them the love of God in a practical way this week?
I would say, and you kind of alluded to it, Russ, I would say seek out the ones that maybe probably could use a friend more than others. So it's easy to maybe talk to the in crowd at work, at church, at school, but I think it's super important to reach out to those who maybe were like myself at one point, where you just feel a little left out and you're probably starving for community. And I still think it comes back to the same thing. Take a vested interest in their life, ask them about themselves, follow up, and continue to pour into them. And what's cool is, again, you don't necessarily need to bring in Jesus or your faith right away. They kind of just know it. You kind of sense that sometimes, and it could lead to really amazing things. And I could say I definitely have so many amazing relationships with people from all different walks of life, and I think it's because I was one of the not cool kids for a long time, and I liked talking to, I liked myself, and so I like to seek out people who maybe not everyone else is talking to and pour into those relationships. So I would say intentionally seek out those relationships where maybe it is not easy to talk to that person, either because you aren't like them, or maybe they have wronged you in the past. I think that's where that is a challenge, but there's so much fruit and opportunity in that. So that would be my answer to your second question.
Good answer. Now this is your opportunity to ask Andres and I questions that you've always wanted to ask.
Dangerous.
Or to Zach.
Or to Zach, most importantly.
Do we have the sensor ready? So I would. We're talking about working in like a corporate environment and bringing faith in. I would love to hear a little bit about working at a church that functions and having it function like a business. Where do you see some similarities or differences, and how do you go about navigating those? Because I know the church has an amazing mission in mind, but it has to be run with some sort of structure. So I'm sure there's a lot that I'm interested in, and I'm sure the audience, the Sanctuary podcast tuner-ins would like to hear.
Sure. Andres, you've been here longer. I'll let you go first.
I'm thinking. I am, as you would say, racking my brain.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
Well, so large churches, yes. So large churches often operate like a business. Doesn't matter what large church you're at. They're all going to operate in a business in some matter. Smaller churches, not really, because there could be like 2 employees for the whole church. So, but with every business, whether it be a church or a gym, the hardest part about operating is that there's people involved, and people are super messy, and they're going to do some things really well, and they're going to have some strengths and a lot of weaknesses. And so there's going to be issues that arise based on that leadership structure's weaknesses. And it's more obvious in a small church because 1 or 2 people are running it, right? But in a big church, you have a whole lot of weaknesses, but you also have people who fill those gaps. So the hard part is working with people. And when problems arise, something that happens when you work at a church is that it's weird because something big happens. It could be just like this really big situation where you need to have this really serious meeting, but you start the meeting by praying, right? Can you imagine doing that at your office where like this huge stressful thing just happened? You got to get a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of meetings really fast.
Yeah.
And you're like, hold on a second, guys. Let's offer this situation up to God, right?
Yeah.
So that's a major difference from being in the secular professional world to being in the church world that can operate like a business. That's something that's huge. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it's super cool. Also,
yeah, it is cool.
Something that I want to bring into my work environment.
Yeah. So that was something that was really cool about coming here, because in my past experience, we prayed out of obligation because that's what Christians and that's what churches did when I was working in a church. And then coming here, it's like people here really like to pray. It was evident like right away. Is like everything Bree's my wife, everything that our interactions with BlackRock, they're always like, wait, let's pray. And I was like, okay. And then we kept praying, and we would do it over and over again. Like every single meeting, people are praying. I'm like, wow, we love to pray here, which is great. We should love to pray, right? We get to interact with God. And so it's really cool how much BlackRock depends on prayer. Yep. And that's something really, really cool.
Yeah, that is cool. I'm glad you shared. You have a different, I've been here so long, you know? I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't think about it. I think something that's interesting too is like the amount that we care for one another, right? So we're not just going into a meeting with like, oh, it's this person who works in that department, this person who works in that department. I don't really care about them. We're just here to get stuff done, move on, keep going forward. But to know like, man, I genuinely care about everybody that I work with. And even like for me working in our student office, like I don't just work with people that I'm like, oh, I see you guys every day, but like, I really love these people. Like I love their families. Like I love Kevin and Carrie, Paul and Mary Kate, Allie and Jamie, Zach. Sorry, I had to do it. I felt bad leaving him out. But like, I genuinely care. So even when we're in staff meetings, like, when stuff happens, and I don't know if it's like this in the professional world, but like, let's say there's conflict that happens in a meeting, like that conflict weighs heavy on my heart. Or if I feel like, man, I said something that was kind of rude or out of line to one of my coworkers, like there's something inside of me that the Holy Spirit's like, hey, like you need to go repair that relationship. And I just feel like in other spaces, it's kind of like, oh, whatever, like they'll get over it, they'll move on. Or you're just so worried about moving up your career ladder that you're not really like worried about who's around you, or like, I'm going to just take these steps to get to where I need to get. But it's like, man, everything we do is as a team. We do it together. We do it in a way that's honoring to God and to each other. So I think that's something that like we get to really benefit from, that I don't think other people really think about or consider. And knowing like, man, something might happen where like, even for me, like, I'm a very relational person. So if I say something that hurts someone else, like that's going to impact the work I'm doing, but it's also going to impact the work they're doing, because we're doing it as a team. Everything we do at BlackRock on our like what happens on a Sunday night for Sanctuary doesn't just happen because Russ shows up and he prepared to talk. It happens because there's volunteers, there's staff running those volunteers, leading those volunteers, Zach leading the worship team. Like all of those things work together, but it's because they all meet together to constantly talk about what's happening, how is that happening, how do we work together to make that happen. So I think that's a really interesting part of what we get to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. You hit the nail on the head about like the relationships, even like cross department.
Yeah,
I had one of the accountant / HR people come in this week to our office and say, congratulate Heather on getting receipts in. And I was like, do we get a prize? And she's like, yeah, what do you want? And so I was like, you just come to Sanctuary. And so she came to Sanctuary because we turned receipts in on time. And it's like, when's the last time you had an interaction with an account, like the billing department of your job? And you were like, do I get a prize? And they're like, yeah, I'll come to your office for a little bit and tell you how good of a job you're doing. Like, it's like that's kind of like what she did. She's like, yeah, I'll come support you in your job because you did a good job and you asked for a prize.
Yeah, it's super sweet getting to work at it.
It's just really cool.
Yeah.
All right, now tell us a secret.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
So I've been listening to this podcast for a long time, and what I've noticed is that sometimes the hosts or other people will say, hey, we should cut that out. But what I've discovered is that Zach never cuts anything out.
Hey, we should cut that out.
Yeah. Have we said that yet, this podcast?
Yeah, you did already.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, people will never know.
Any other questions, Kyle?
Final thoughts? Last questions? Have Andres tell us a secret.
Andres, tell us a secret.
I expose myself all the time on this podcast. Not like that.
The audio. I only watch the audio version. Listen.
Yeah, we would definitely cut that out. That is not making it. Zach, we got to make sure that's going to get us in trouble.
My secret is that I played over 1,000 games of Lords of Waterdeep on my phone.
How long does a single game take?
Probably like, we'd have timers, so it'd be like a half hour, but
Wow.
you do them, like that's what? 500 hours.
That's
Zach did the math.
incredible.
I needed to delete the app.
Yeah.
Now I had a winning percentage of like 85%.
Impressive.
But not impressive.
How many people play at once?
So you could do 2-player games, 3-player games, 4-player games. It started with like some buddies, but then I just would play with all these random people. And yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Is that
Wow.
it?
Yeah,
That's it.
that's it.
Well, with all this editing that Zach's going to do, there's going to be like 20 minutes of the podcast.
Is there?
Yeah, because we said too much messed up stuff.
There's good content.
Good. Yeah, Kyle, thanks for being here.
Such an honor.
Kyle, thanks for the basketball hoop.
Yeah.
We're going to play so much.
We
You
are.
get so much better, Andres.
We
I
are.
can't
Next
wait to
time
see
you come on, watch how many shots we make.
That's right. It's going to be great.
Love it.
See you next time. I was talking to you, Kyle.
I want you to stay.